Our greatest presidents have been those who could put themselves imaginatively in the shoes of the led. And yes, leadership is about taking us from a place of our comfort to a place that we may not know we want to go, but that we should go. Harry Truman once said, the job of an American president is to convince people to do what they know they ought to do but don't want to do. It's a brilliant way of putting it. But it's understanding all of that. That's the emotional transaction that has to unfold. And I want to tell you a story. The most empathetic man I ever knew, not just president, but man, was George Herbert Walker Bush, who, when you think about it now, could not be nominated by the party that sent him to the White House in 1988 and 1992. His son could not be nominated, having been nominated in 2004. I mean, that's how quickly some of this moves. But it's a quick story about someone you've never heard of named Bennett McNichol. And Bennett McNichol, this is key to the story, was a fairly rotund lad. He was a pretty heavy guy. He was a classmate of George Herbert Walker Bush's at Greenwich Country Day School in the 1930s. There was an annual obstacle course race at Greenwich Country Day School. Young Bush was 13 years old. He always won the race. He was about to go off to Andover, so the faculty came to him and said, would you let everyone have a head start and then you go? And Bush said, sure. So everybody goes, and then Bush goes. And he's going through a series of narrow barrels on the ground, on the playground, and he pops out of the barrel, and he looks to his right, and Bennett McNichol is stuck in the barrel, right? Moment of maximum adolescent humiliation, right? You're the heavy kid, you're stuck in a barrel, the most glamorous boy in the school is looming over you. So what does Bush do? He reaches down, he pulls him out, he says, come on, Bennett, we'll finish this together. Right? Sweet schoolboy moment, right? It's the kind of moment that a presidential family, it's the kind of story that they have that they tell us about how great their chieftain is. But I didn't hear it from a McNichol. I mean, I didn't hear it from a Bush. I heard it from a McNichol. The guy told the story for 70 years because it was the nicest thing anyone had ever done for him. And so I took it to President Bush, and we were down in Houston. And I said, Mr. President, I just heard this story about Bennett McNichol. And the first thing the old man said was, Bennett, he loved lunch. I said, no. That's really not the point, sir. He's still big. I said, Mr. President, focus. I said, why did you pull him out of the barrel? And he looked at me, and he said, as if I were crazy, he said, well, listen to what he said. I've never been stuck in a barrel, but if I had been, I'd want somebody to pull me out. It's a really interesting answer. It's not, I pulled him out because my mother told me so. It wasn't the Bible taught me to do this. It was a kind of pragmatic empathy. I'd never been stuck in a barrel, but if I had been, I'd want somebody to pull me out. That's a definition of democratic citizenship that is absolutely essential because it is grounded in reality. It's grounded in a recognition that we are not saintly. We are sinful. It is hard to do the right thing. If it were easy, we wouldn't be in this mess. It would be different. But it's not, because this is the way, as Dr. King said, I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be, and you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. That's the way God's universe is made. That's the way it is structured. He said that in his last Sunday sermon at Washington National Cathedral on the day that Lyndon Johnson got out of the 1968 presidential race. Best definition of democracy I've ever heard. I can't be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And that's where the struggle is. And the President of the United States, historically at his so far best, has been the figure who can model a decency and a dignity and a commitment to democracy. And they are not perfect. They are flawed, but I go back again and again. If they do the right thing 51% of the time, I will take it and run. So I want to leave you with this. If I'm right, and I think I am, it's like the old preacher who said, as our Lord said, and rightly. I always liked that story. Empathy is the oxygen of democracy. Presidents who are empathetic lead us in ways that can take us to that more perfect union. And let's be very clear, they are imperfect people. We are imperfect people. But we can create a more perfect union by remaining in conversation with and in covenant with the basic principle that it's better to lend a hand than to throw a punch. It's better to build a bridge than a wall. It's better to reach out instead of pulling back. It's give and take, and it's really hard to give. If everybody gave, you wouldn't need development offices. Sorry, Mr. President. Right? It's hard. And the character of the person at the top matters. Because let me tell you, not least, it matters, not least, intuitively it matters. But the history of the American Republic is rife with unanticipated crises. You never know what's going to hit that desk. You never know what history and fate will present. So you better be absolutely as sure as you can be that the person in whom you are investing ultimate power has a heart and a mind that tends to the light and not the dark.